It's about control and authority, and it's about power and ability, right? So if you think about it in the literal sense, we're talking about anybody having possession, ownership, control, authority, power, and ability. But do you think that we have it in the absolute sense? Do you think we ever have possession and ownership or control and authority or power and ability in the absolute sense? Can you guys think of an example of something that I possess and I own, but I don't have control or authority over it? Can you guys think of an example?
Life itself, life?
Life itself, I possess it, I own it, but I don't have control and authority over it, right? Great example. Anything else? Yeah? Yes, Maria? My house. I possess it, I own it. Do I have control and authority over it? I mean, I kind of do, right? If somebody comes and starts living in my house, I'll be like, what are you doing? Right?
But you don't have control over what could happen to the house. Like
You don't have control over what I mean, Brother Samir, subhanAllah, he went on a vacation and he came back and his house was burned down to crisp. SubhanAllah, like it's just, he possessed it, he owned it, but he didn't have any control or authority over what was happening. You had an example too?
Well, she kind of took. It's also like a car too. Like I was
Right.
saying, like
Yeah.
the engine could not start one day. And
Yes, right? So, I mean, I have another example that I was thinking when I was making these slides, like money that I lend to you, for example, right? So, I possessed it, I owned it. Once I gave it to you, I don't have any control or authority over it. You do whatever you want with it, right? Similarly, can you guys think of an example of something that you have control and ability, control and authority over, but you don't have power and ability over it? That's a good one. I had the same. Like you have control and authority, but you can't mold them.
When you go back to the chains,
Play-Doh
like
and,
they
make
are able
something
to
out of them and
recognize
be
who
like,
they
oh,
were.
this is what I want.
Also they can die.
Also, they can die, and you don't have the
there
power,
are
the ability to stop
a
that
few
from
things
happening.
that
Very
are happening
morbid
at this
thoughts
point
today,
and very
sir.
early on in the
How,
hadith
everything
tradition.
okay?
Narrating uncriticized
Both
narrators,
examples
right?
that,
So if an individual
he
is
gave us
criticized,
that were related to
is this a
death
hadith
and,
that would be
dying.
accepted or not? And it
Okay,
depends on the
salamat.
critique. And we will talk about parts and some of the
I was
critiques
thinking,
that the scholars of hadith
simple
actually
thing,
made
like
against narrators.
my phone, right?
Also rejecting a
I
narration
have
due to a
control and
break in the
authority
chain.
over it, but can I turn this into an iPad? No. Can I run iOS on this? It's Android. No, right? Oh, I'm pro Android. I'm like anti-iPhone.
Of course, that's why I say I was.
Oh, okay. You are too. All right. I tried an iPhone for a year and I was like, one button for everything? How does that even work? How can you have one button for everything? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, so that sort of, leads me into it's a segue to the next point that I'm trying to make, is that Allah has perfect ownership, right? He has possession. He has possession and ownership. At the same time, he has control and authority. And at the same time, he has power and ability. So it's perfect in the absolute sense. When you say Malik, he has perfect and absolute ownership. So different ulama, in the past have tried to define the name Malik, okay, Al-Malik, and some of them have, they've tried to bifurcate his ownership in the spiritual sense. Some have done it in the physical sense. Spiritual sense as in Maliki Yawmiddin, right? He's the Malik, he's the owner, he's the king of the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Some have made it in a sense of physical sense, that he has power and ownership over all the physical ability, like physical aspects of this dunya and the akhirah. And some have spoken about both, right? But essentially, all the different ulama are talking about the same thing, and which is absolute and perfect ownership. Okay, and talking about control and authority and possession and ownership and power. All these things is what the word malaka encompasses within itself. Like I said again, and they're talking about perfect ownership. So al-malak has come in the Quran, has been mentioned in the Quran 5 times. Okay, out of that, these are the 3 that I mentioned over here only because I didn't have space for the other 2. But that's fine. You guys, that's homework for you guys to look up the other 2 ayahs. So فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ, exalted be Allah, the one who is truly in control. This is in Taha. هُوَ اللَّهُ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الْمُلْكُ, and هُوَ الْمَلِكُ, and this continues into the rest of his names. Al-Malik al-Quddus, As-Salam. And then Malik al-Nas, I think we read this a lot in Surah al-Nas. So if you look at these 3, what is the one word that is common in the translation? Control. Okay, so that's a great translation of the tafsir that I've been using. They're different, they're different. Like for example, there was a tafsir that I read, a translation, and it uses the word king or sovereign. But then Abdul Hamid is another translation that I was reading, and he used the word controller, and that somehow seemed more encompassing. Because when we talk about authority, ownership, when we talk about possession, we talk about control, all these things come under the head of being a controller of everything that you can imagine. Al-Malik has been mentioned twice only in the Quran. So, Maliki Yawmiddin, and the second time is Qul Allahumma Malikul Mulk, the holder of all control, the master of Day of Judgment. So again, these 2 also have been, Al-Malik has also been sort of mentioned in the Quran in the sense of complete and total ownership. I'm getting a little distracted with this. Do you guys mind going out and talking? Sorry, I get very easily distracted.
Can you maximize the PowerPoint on the projector?
Sorry?
Can you maximize the PowerPoint on the projector? Like through the computer?
If you tell me how, yeah?
I'll pop out my.
Okay. I can do it as long as you tell me how to do it. Okay, so that's Malik. So we've talked about Malik and we've talked about Malik. Al-Malik was mentioned 5 times, Al-Malik is mentioned twice. And then lastly, another form is also Al-Malik. And Al-Malik, the Mufassirin say that this is the superlative form of Malik. So if we were having a hard time comprehending, Al-Malik, just imagine what Al-Malik would be, right? So this has only been mentioned in Surah Al-Qamar. It says, the righteous will live securely among gardens and rivers, secure in the presence of an all-powerful sovereign. Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa nahar fi maqad as-sidq inda malikul muqtadir. So if you go back to Surah Al-Qamar, the previous ayahs, they talk about all the previous nations, like Lut al-Islam, Nuh, Qawm Nuh, Ad, Thamud, all those nations, and how powerful they were and how much control and authority they felt that they had, right? And then what happened to them? They got destroyed, right? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the verses before this one, He addresses the mushrikeen of Makkah, and He says, do you believe that you have more control and more authority than those previous aqwam, than those previous nations? You had, they were more than you in number, they were more than you in wealth, they were more than you in might. And look what happened to them. Is that better?
I think the hiccup was more is the speed. Yeah.
What is the hiccup?
I think it's having trouble with the recording. I don't know.
No, we'll figure it next class.
Okay.
Continue, sorry.
All right, no worries. I can also, next time I'll just bring my iPad because I can't turn this into an iPad. So I'll just bring my iPad and I will just do my notes there.
Okay.
Will that help?
Whatever is easy for you.
Whatever is easy for you, for that, right? Making it big. Okay. Anyway, so they addressed the mushrikeen of Makkah, like I was saying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed the mushrikeen and He said, you people believe you have, more control. Those people had actually, they were, bigger and mightier than you, and look what happened to them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, Yawm al-Qiyamah, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will wrap the heavens and the earth in His right hand, and nobody will have any authority or control, and how that day will be so thaqeel, so hard and so bitter for the mushrikeen. But the righteous, inshallah, all of us, we make dua that we're part of that. We will be secure. You remember how we spoke about the qaylula? That we'll be tired and then we'll get to Jannah and then we have a siesta, right? So we will be sitting on maq'ad as-sidq. Maq'ad is a chair or seat. Sidq is truth. So we held on to the truth in this world, and so we will be given, how like when we go somewhere, like at the wedding we went to, it was actually the Sheikh's brother's wedding, younger brother. So when we went there, they're not like they're not Pakistani, they're Sudanese. But when we went, they had like these 2 tables and chairs set separately for us, and it had like a, different kind of setting, and it made us feel like, okay, this is for us, and we came in and there was like a whole procession, and then they were like, please. So just imagine, when we get to Jannah, they're going to be maq'ad as-sidq over there for us to sit on, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll be like one of those, what are those called? The ones that you can recline and just and just sort of chill and relax on it. Who knows, maybe we can do the siesta on that. But in the Malikul Muqtadiran, so Malikul Muqtadiran, so Malik is, like I said, the super later form of Mulk or Malik, right? And Muqtadir, this means one, the numbered one or the measured one. So everything that day, just like in the dunya and the akhirah too, everything is going to be measured. Everybody will get exactly what they deserve. Today my son was having this argument with, I don't know, some online friend. He was playing a game with him, and he's like, no, bro, what are you talking about? Life is fair. And I don't know, his friend was trying to bring the argument that life isn't fair, and Saad was like, no, bro, life is fair. Mama, life is fair, right? I'm like, no. He's like, mute. he's like, wait, I just lost the argument. So I was like, no, life is, and then he was like, hang on, bro, I'll be back. And then he like put his headset down. He's like, what do you mean life isn't fair? So, that's true, right? Life isn't fair. You don't get what you deserve. I gave him this whole example of how mama does all the work. Sometimes you guys don't help me. How is that fair? And he's like, okay, I'll unload the dishwasher. So good, I got something out of it. But the point is, that it's measured. Everything is measured in terms of who gets what, who gets how much, and who gets it when. And that's done by Al-Malik, the most sovereign. So moving forward, again, Al-Imran 27, يولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. Again, another beautiful ayah, just capturing Allah's control, right? Can there's nobody who can actually do this. And just like the mushrikeen were asked us, that do you people think you have more might? Can you do this? right? So you merge night into day and day into night. You bring the living out of the dead and dead out of the living. You provide limitlessly for who you will, whoever you will. And this is another amazing thing, بِغَيْرِ حِسَاب. We see a lot of people who transgress, but they have a lot with them. Right? Like we start comparing on social media and other platforms too. We're like, this person, like, it's like they're openly in ma'asi and they have so much wealth, they have so much power. It seems like they're enjoying life. He gives them بغير حساب. But then what's going to happen on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Right? He's the muqtadir there. That's when it's going to be measured, and he's going to pull the rope and say, okay, now give me an answer to everything I gave you. Again, it's talking about perfect ownership. So another point that I wanted to talk about, who is greater, the Malik or the Malik? Because if you think about it, they are pronounced differently. They have the same root, but Mufassirin have talked about how they might differ in meaning. Malik or Malik. Do you guys have any ideas about that? Malik is bigger. Is it because you stretch the alif more?
No, I just remember from Fatiha, Maliki and the Deen, Master of the Day of Judgment.
Yeah.
That's obviously the greatest.
The greatest of the greatest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what
Is there any other view? Anybody? How many people say Malik? How many people say Malik? That's Malak. That's something else. Sorry? Heard something. So there is khilaf, as with everything. Surprise. So there are different opinions. So Shawkani and Zamakhshari, they, and others, but two of the most prominent ones, they feel that Al-Malik is actually greater than Al-Malik. So anybody familiar with Venn diagrams? Right? Okay. So Malik is within Al-Malik. So if you think about it, if I say Malik, Malikul Sayyara, Malikul Bayt, right? Malikul Jawal. I'm the owner of the house, I'm the owner of the car, I'm the owner of the phone. Okay? Al-Malik, Malikul Mulk. That's the king. That's the sovereign. That is why these scholars are of the opinion that Al-Malik is greater than the sovereign is higher or more in power than the owner. So that's one opinion. The other opinion is obviously not a surprise. It's the other way around. I think there's a Maliki scholar, Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, not the Sufi one, the Maliki one, that Al-Malik, he felt, is bigger than Al-Malik. And he used the logic that in the previous example, we're dividing it, like we're saying sovereign and owner, right? But that's from a humanistic point of view, right? Like when we say the king is bigger than, the owner of the house, right? But in his opinion, actually, the owner even owns the sovereign. Okay? So just a little trivia, there are different opinions. Just wanted to bring it into your, to your attention. When you're using either one of these to, seek Allah's pleasure or make dua, make these a part of your azkar, then obviously it doesn't really matter if you're using Malik or Malik, but just, like I said, a little bit of trivia. So how does this name affect our iman, right? That's the end game, right? That's the reason we're going over these names, that how does this affect us? So true ownership belongs to Him alone, right? If I have ownership over something, it is only because He, Azza wa Jal, has given me that ability, has considered me worthy of that ownership. So trying to understand that concept, how much control do we actually have over what we feel like we have control over everything, right? But it's not because, like, I think in one of the previous classes I even said this, that when one of my kids say, why me, I always ask them, well, when you were given something, you weren't asked why me, right? It's the same concept, that you have, the only reason why you're here today and you have all these blessings is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered you worthy, and He gave you limited control over whatever you have. So when we think about the word Al-Malik or Al-Malik, let us be more conscientious about what He has bestowed us and how much control we have over it, and how much control Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has over all these things. Any second, we hear about people just passing away, like, I think last week, subhanAllah, the gentleman, he fell and he hit his head, I think, right, in the shower, and he passed away. They made a janazah for him. I mean, we know somebody, 25-year-old, she was going on a hike, she fell, she passed away. Just it's a matter of seconds, right? So just more bringing this consciously into our thoughts, into our du'as, how much control we have and how much control Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. And have you seen those pictures from the sky of the earth? How they like zoom out and you're like, you can't even see the earth anymore? It's literally sometimes, just like zoom out. Not everything is, there are things bigger than me. There are things bigger than us. Again, He makes the night merge into the day and the day into the night. He has subjected the moon, the sun and the moon. Each runs for an appointed time. Such is God, your Lord. All control belongs to Him. Those you invoke beside Him do not even control the skin of a date stone. Qitmir. Skin of a date stone. The most useless part of a date. Have you heard of anybody peeling the skin off the date pit and eating it? You won't even be able to take it out like as a whole. It'll come out in like weird pieces. Nobody's going to dry it and use it for anything. Right? Just imagine. Qitmir. You don't even have control. Not even control the skin of a date stone. When you're trying to peel it from the pit, it just breaks away. You can't even take the whole wrapper out on its own. Just imagine. How much control do we really have? Seems like we don't have much control at all, actually. Yes?
But you have control over other things that are bigger than that, but you don't have control over things that are smaller.
Well, it depends, right? Like if you buy something bigger like oranges, a bag of oranges, how many times have we bought it and they've all been really, really bitter? Right? We bought it, we possessed it, but we didn't have the ability to make them sweet. Right? Idris. So absolute owner is most deserving of absolute obedience. That's the second point that we should all consider. That the one who has control, who has perfect and absolute ownership and perfect and absolute control, he is the most deserving of absolute obedience. And in reality, there's just one being who you have to worry about pleasing. Right? I remember years back, when we were studying, and I had my first khatra, and I was stressing about what if there's nobody there to listen to me, right? What if nobody comes? How embarrassing! And I mean, thank God there are plenty of people here today. But I remember, Dr. Maria, my teacher, she's like, there's just one who you have to, there's just one who needs to hear you. As long as he's hearing you, it doesn't matter who attends or not, because you're there just to please that one. So your audience is just one, really. So all the time when we're worried about like, who will, what will they think? Will they be there? Will they see me? Will they not? It's just one who you have to worry about. That really takes a lot of burden off you. Really, decompresses you and says, okay, one is easier to please than the whole crowd, inshallah. And the absolute owner also has absolute control over the day of judgment. Like we said, this is a long hadith, but I think a really beautiful one. It says, Abdullah ibn Masud said, a Jewish rabbi came to Allah's messenger and said, O Muhammad, we learned that Allah will place all the heavens on a finger. All the heavens. We don't even know how many they are. He will place them on one finger. The earth's on a finger. The trees on a finger. the water on a finger, the soil on a finger, and the rest of creation on a finger. So basically, in his hand, on all the fingers, he will wrap everything, right? And then he will say, I am Al-Malik. I am Al-Malik. I am the king. I am the controller. I am the owner. You can't even imagine, right? If I say just imagine, I don't think anybody can imagine. You just can't imagine. So the Prophet ﷺ laughed till his premolar teeth became visible, in affirmation of the truthfulness of the speech of the rabbi. Because this is an Israeliyat, right? Like they used to, tell them, like they're part of, if like this is in Bukhari and Muslim because Rasulullah ﷺ affirmed it. Then he recited Surah Al-Zumar, and he said, they made not a just estimate of Allah as is due to him, and on the day of resurrection the whole of the earth will be grasped by his hand, and the heavens will be rolled up by his right hand. Exalted is he, free of all imperfections, high above all that they associate as partners with him. So again, when we talk about ownership and control and authority, Al-Malik, Al-Malikul Mulk, he is the one who has absolute control and possession and ownership. It's a shorter class today, but I want to end by, my goal every time is to try to find like some kind of a dua that addresses Allah's name in it, that name that we spoke about. So that when we're reading it, everything that we read about or we studied about Al-Malik, 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 when we're making this dua, we can sort of, just remember who we're asking. Like, who is it that we're asking? Sometimes I don't feel like we have enough power in our duas because we forget who we're asking. It's like a wishy-washy kind of a dua. But just imagine who we're asking. Qul Allahumma Malikul Mulk. Now just imagine this is the Malikul Mulk who's going to wrap all of this in his hand. تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك من تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيد الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. O Allah, holder of all control, you give control to whoever you will and remove it from whoever you will. You elevate whoever you will and humble whoever you will. All that is good lies in your hand. You have power over everything. We can include this in our daily or weekly, whatever word you guys have. But this is a beautiful dua, because remember in the first class we talked about how can we use his names, and it's not just, dua is not only to ask Allah for things, right? Dua is also to praise Allah, right? And so this is just a dhikr of Allah. You're just affirming and sort of acknowledging and submitting to the fact that Allah has power over everything. Yeah. So if anything from this class, I would like all of you to take this, dua away and try to, think about it, sit with it for a bit. Inshallah, next week we'll try to do 2 names. Some names are not going to have, a lot of background, a lot of information on them. If they're shorter, then we'll try to cover 2. But yeah, again, apologies for last week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So what do you want to do for next time? Should I? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, because I can bring my iPad. It didn't get recorded. It didn't get recorded.
Which one?
What was that?
No, that one is like streaming there. No.
Something happening right now?
Huh?
Something happening?
Tomorrow is this class.
Oh.
Leaving.